Okay, Jeff here. Just another thing I totally forgot to mention. Earlier on, I'm going to try to decide where I'm going to insert this into the rest of the series. But uh, uh, when I say Germans, there's of course, the country of Germany. Um, but we can we can consider that Germanic-speaking territories, which will have a lot of the whole cultural thing. You can have, the north area of Switzerland. You could have Austria, Liechtenstein, and actually, um, uh, eastern France, because eastern France, the Alsace and Lorraine kind of regions, of which um, Alsace had been occupied by the Germans for a long period of time. I mean, quite a long time. And what I've seen actually for in a couple of different situations, in a couple of different contexts, at work, and in nonprofit associations with people that are French of the Alsace region, especially Strasbourg. Um, I've seen the German traits, the German traits, and it's kind of a weird mix because it the traits are kind of they're non-French, right? So the priest people speak French, but the traits are non-French, and so or they're a mixture. And so there's definitely this domination needing to the whole thing with the high hierarchy. It's very instilled. I mean, it's very obvious. Whereas I've seen some Germans that I've worked with some Germans on some projects that actually are trying to get away from that, right? But it and that's kind of working with working with French people that have the German traits from a certain region. Um, when you talk with people about that region, they're not from the region. And so yeah, they're all that way. I mean, you hear this, when you start asking questions, right? The people from eastern France, from the border, um, there is this. Again, there are always exceptions, right? But there's definitely this dominating or this Germanic culture that has influenced that area because it had been occupied. I was actually French. It was French. I mean, it was German for a long period of time, and actually German was an official language for a long period of time in Alsace. So and only probably in the since the war, since World War II, that this has begin to change. Um, but because it's so ingrained, and we know that we can see that culture continues on, it continues on for generations and generations. It continues to hang over, and we can see, as we've mentioned, that some of the cultural traits continue on 80 years later in Germany. It's not surprising that in Alsace, especially Alsace, because closer Germany, Lorraine as well, those regions still have, um, you know, Germanic traits there. It's not surprising. So that's something to keep in mind um, when we're talking about Germanic culture or these national cultures. It's not just national. Again, language is not determined by a border, always by a social border, and usually language goes along with culture, right? So usually cultural things and language they go together hand in hand. You don't have just a speaking language. You have the culture that goes along with that language, because the language was brought by a certain culture usually. So that culture has had some kind of it can be we can call this colonization, or we can call it just territorial occupation, whatever you want to call this. This usually does influence certain other areas that are nearby countries, because it was kind of back and forth for a long time, right? So, um, so I think that's really important to keep in mind. And so even some of the French, Eastern France, you're going to find some of these similar traits. Um, it's I'm not gonna say it's not 100%. Kind of depends on the person, but I've seen it more than once, and so and it seems to be recurrent, um, at a similar type of level. So uh, so yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind here for what we want to call German culture, right? So that's not for that point there.